think you mentioned from Africa. What time would it be at this time? At this time, I hope they're awake and not in half sleep.
To be honest, I believe it should be about 5 hours difference.
Oh my.
That's yeah. So it must be like early morning for them. But then these learners are quite dedicated. They're quite good. So they're quite interested in when we have guest lectures just like yourself coming in and sharing valuable knowledge. So they
Mhm.
come and join us and be a part of it. They have a lot of beautiful questions that they ask as well.
Excellent. I'm really glad to know students get up that early and be part of, especially on a weekend. That's
True.
great. I hope my time is justifies the effort of being part of it.
Indeed. I'm sure it will.
Yeah, because even even when I write or when I speak, my aim is always that people take out something out of that session or maybe out of the article which I write or a video which they can implement. Because at the end of it, there is so much of content available these days, right? You can just get lost in that ocean of content without implementing, So whenever I read a book, my strategy is always how can I implement that book in my life. That's how I follow, and I hope my endeavor is always that people also get something which they have achieved. Otherwise, there's no point, right? Reading a book or writing a book or listening to something or watching a video that should culminate into something tangible at the end of it. So I I hope people get something out of it which they can use it in their life. 1 hour is more of a teaser and introduction session, but let's see how it goes.
So let's just take this as a beginning. Maybe we'll have many more to come.
Absolutely, I'm looking forward.
All right, learners, yes, we are on mute. We will shortly start. Just give us a few more minutes.
Sir, I think we should start.
All right, should we then begin?
Yes, I think we can start.
Okay, lovely. All right, hello, good morning, everyone. Just give me a moment, please. Okay. So hello, everyone. A very good morning to you all. Welcome to Dr. D.Y. Patil Vidyapeeth's Center for Online Learning. I also welcome you all to this new brainwave session. And in this series, today's topic is on emotional intelligence and well-being. To begin the session, I would like to actually begin with a quote. Nothing great will be achieved without great men. And men are only great if they are determined to do so. Ladies and gentlemen, this holds true for our Honorable Chancellor, Sir, Dr. P.D. Patil, our Pro-Chancellor, Ma'am, Dr. Bhagyashree Patil, Ma'am, and of course, Vice-Chancellor, Sir, Dr. N.J. Pawar. Dr. D.Y. Patil Vidyapeeth has actually developed into this magnificent organization through the guidance of these distinguished individuals, corrective efforts. And it is Dr. P.D. Patil's philanthropic endeavors that actually inspires us to bring you all learners with quality education. Our Honorable Trustee Ma'am and our Executive Director, Dr. Smita Zadav, has always been a source of motivation since she herself is a go-getter and a dynamic personality. A pessimist usually always complains about the wind, and an optimist tries to change it. And a leader adjusts the sails. That's our Director of Center for Online Learning, Dr. Safia Faruqi. She is the leader who guides us and shows us the direction by adjusting the sails. For today's session, I would like to welcome Roshan Shetty. Mr. Shetty actually has been an Indian corporate for the last 20 years, and he has worked with some of the most prominent organizations where his expertise actually spans from project management to process re-engineering, service excellence, CRM solutions, and sales. And his journey in the corporate sector has been enriching and fulfilling. While he was doing all of this, he has also authored a book, and that book is Shift Left. And this is currently available on Amazon on sale. So I would now like to ask Roshan to take over and start his session.
Thank you, Sohail, for that elaborate introduction. I think it's great to be part of this esteemed institution and come here and speak with the students, uh, with the dignitaries who are on the panel today. It's really excellent. I still look at myself as a student. I don't anywhere look at myself as a mentor because the learning process never stops for me. Uh, in this world that we are in, which is so complex and ever changing, there's so much to learn each and every single day. And with all the platforms which are available today, I think it really becomes difficult from where do you learn. It's unlike, 20, 30 years ago, where information was so scarce, it was so difficult to retrieve information. I still remember the days when I had to run to bookstores to get books during my college days. So I think we are living in great times, but we need to just take care of few areas uh, as we navigate our lives and circumvent the issues which encapsulated. Uh, Hello to everyone. It's great to come and speak with you. I've been told there are people from India, there are students from abroad who are joining us internationally, and I think you guys have just woken up. It's very early morning. I was really surprised. I was just checking with Sohail, and he said it's really early morning. So thank you so much for being part of it. Uh, I hope my screen is visible. I'm very audible to you all, so I can start off. Sohail, I hope the screen is visible, right?
It is indeed, yes.
Okay. So like Sohail mentioned, the topic that we're discussing today is emotional intelligence. And like I mentioned, the times that we are living in, it's especially with the pandemic on our head in the past 18 months to 24 months, uh, things have always already been very volatile and it's only getting complex. The uncertainty around us creates a lot of anxiety. Uh, we were as a plan as the entire world has been moving into the robotic age where you see automation, you see technology being at the forefront and driving things at a pace which is so difficult to understand and comprehend at times. It just gets so overwhelming. uh, Emotional intelligence is something which I look at as a topic and as a subject, uh, which should help us tide over these uncertainties to give us to create light on a path which is so difficult to navigate otherwise. Uh, Let me be very frank. I was never into this topic. I was never interested. I was busy in my own world, in the corporate world, working on various projects which were assigned to me. Uh, but there was something which happened personally. I was undergoing an anxiety attack in the year 2015-16, and that went on for 3 years. I had some kind of mental disorders which I was not able to fathom. Uh, I never had any kind of past issue, and it became really difficult for me to understand why this was really happening. That is the time when I started reading stuff. I started reading books. I started reading research papers to understand why does this happen. And slowly, when I got into stats, when I started reading the data, it was really mind numbing for me. And that is what actually led me to write a book, which is titled Shift Left, that Sohail mentioned. It talks about it talks about the quest of individuals when we are chasing happiness. Does that chase really lead us to happiness, or does it lead us somewhere else, which actually pushes us deep into grief? So that is what the book talks about. It's written in a very simple language, and it talks about all these things. The program today is an extract of the book, is something which I have researched and find out on my own, and I hope you would enjoy this program as well. The most importantly, I would love you people to take some points. It's very difficult to gather everything, but it takes some points, and you can implement that in your daily life. And I hope uh, that comes out and that is helpful for you. So today we will look at multiple topics. We are running on a clock. I just have 1 hour, as Sohail told me. Uh, so we start with the definition of emotional intelligence. What do you mean by emotional intelligence? How do people look at it? What are the tenets of it? Then we look at how can you practice mindful ways in a very short and sweet way. We look at different kind of mindsets, what creates, what depletes your ego. We look at a very important heuristic, which is perceptions and bias, which is a very important contributor to emotional intelligence. We look at the definition of happiness, how happiness has been defined in the world today and what it actually is. We look at the nature of our own fears that really restricts our limitation. It really restricts our growth in many ways. And then we look at technology. Like I mentioned, technology is shaping our lives and it is manipulating and maneuvering a lot of our emotions. So this is the other topics which I want to touch upon. But importantly, emotional intelligence, what is it? We hear this term so often these days. Uh, until now, this term has been in the background, it has never been in the forefront. But the way the world is shaping right now, this term is really coming up in many forums, in many areas, and people want to take it up as an equivalent skill, as a skill, just like you know how to use Excel, how to use PowerPoint, how do you work on projects. This skill also is coming up as an important tool to navigate and help you out in your personal lives and in your professional lives. Uh, Many of or times I ask people what is emotional intelligence. So people feel that if they have attended a session on emotional intelligence, uh, they will automatically be very happy. Always, there will be no pressures on them. They will be able to deal with every aspect of life, and that is not true at all. That is absolutely incorrect. That is not emotional intelligence. Like the word suggests, it is intelligence about your own emotions. It is about knowing your own emotions. Over here, you are, as you observe a third party, as you observe an external world, the people around us, the people who are in our ecosystem, emotional intelligence asks you to self introspect and an internal appraisal of the self, knowing yourself, where you are being observant about your own emotions. What kind of emotions do you carry? What triggers that emotion, and then what is the response that you normally generate during an emotion, right? uh, when you start understanding that, when you start comprehending that, that process helps your thinking, and thinking and thoughts eventually leads to your behaviors and habits, and that forms your decision making in various skills, not just in your professional space, as a student, but also in your personal lives with your family, with your loved ones, and so on and so forth. Uh, it speaks about empathy. Many of you might have heard the famous singer Adele released her album called 30, and the entire album is is on the lines of depression. She's depressed and she's talking about the divorce. But people listening to that album have actually reported, feeling very good, feeling very light in their head. And how has that happened? Uh, Again, Adele in her album has struck a note, which talks about sadness, and that in fact creates a link with the people who listen to her. In scientific terms, that releases a hormone called an oxytocin. Oxytocin is a hormone which is released when you connect with people, when you form relationships, when you form bonds. That is what emotional intelligence helps you. It not just helps you to understand your emotions, but because you understand your own emotions, because you're able to regulate your thinking, you automatically get empathetic to others' opinions, others' decisions, other situations, and you do not prejudge them. And finally, in leadership today, emotional intelligence is seen as a very important skill to have when you're managing people around you, the way you deal with people, the way you want to talk to people, and so on and so forth. Uh, why do we need emotional intelligence? All this is good, but why do you need to have it? During my research, I found that the World Health Organization in 2000, in their 2019 report has has listed 900 plus million people worldwide who have some or the other form of mental instability. Now, this is a rising number. and it's only doubling by the day. The World Economic Forum has listed emotional intelligence in the top 5 skills to have in the next 5 years. Being in an academic arena, I wasn't taught emotional intelligence, but it's important right from the grassroots level. Students are aware of this emotional intelligence because the moment you step out in the external world, outside the realms of your comfort, outside the realms of people around you, you are exposed to an unknown world. You are exposed to strangers outside who can be your colleagues, who can be your supervisors, who can be your subordinates. And how do you deal with them is an important skill that has to be imparted today. That has also been listed out by some of the leading media across the world. You speak of Harvard Business Review, HBR, or you speak about of the Wall Street Journal. They are coming out with articles which emphasize the point that there is a shift from being a boss to a mentor. And people today don't need people to boss them, but they need people who can guide them, who can coach them into the areas of success and so on and so forth. But like I mentioned, what exactly is emotional intelligence? And the entire term is very counterintuitive from the way people look at. People think if I am an emotional intelligence expert or I know what emotional intelligence is, I will be happy at all times. I will never be sad. And that is an absolute wrong notion to have. And let me tell you why. Because emotional intelligence, first, the most important, at the crux of it, is to embrace your vulnerabilities. You need to know what your weaknesses are, and you need to know how do you work with your weaknesses. You are not supposed to hide those weaknesses, uh, without thinking they're exposed. Just be open about it. Just be out there in front of people, and deliberate on it, and then start working. Don't hide it or don't run away from it. As humans, if you study the history of Homo sapiens, we are built on dark emotions. Our forefathers who were hunter gatherers, who were in forests and who lived in jungles, uh, they developed or they had these very innate emotional uh, habits or behaviors which still continue today. You know, Today we live in cities, we live in smart arenas with the best of gadgets. And I say this that we have only upgraded certain applications within our mind, but our software and operating system and our hardware still is in times of our ancestors, of our forefathers, of the hunter-gatherers, because we still feel, emote, think, behave the way those people behaved in those times. Just to give you an example, a term which is called as supernormal stimulus. In times when we were hunter-gatherers, when we navigated in forests and in jungles, we were always low on calories. We never had adequate food to feed us well or to satiate our nutrition. But and we thrived. We lived on fruits and berries, whatever we found in the forest at those times. So that created a craving within people back then. Today in 2021, that craving still exists in spite of being having the right nutrition, having all the calories, having all the kind of different diets that you can have. Still, that craving, that emotion still exists, and that's the reason you find people just consuming food without having a check on the calorie. And because that emotion is still being brought forward from those uh, epochs till date, and that's how it works. And as we move on in the presentation, you would see how we are built on those varied kind of dark emotions even today. Uh, Emotional intelligence is to understand happiness, and today I see at the world, and I see there are two major, huge projects which are carried out around the world. The first project that we see is the extension of lifespan. You see the billionaires, the Bezos and the Musks and the Peter Thiels of the world, who are working endlessly and spending billions of dollars trying to figure out, trying to research on how human lifespan can be expanded, how it can If the average lifespan is 70, 75 today, they are working out to find out how that lifespan can increase from 75, 80 to maybe even 100 or 120. But the question is, if people start living for 120 years, what will they do? You know, that's a very question. And importantly, how will they be happy? Let's say, for example, you get your degrees, you graduate from colleges at the age of 20, 25. You have got certain knowledge which you have gained as a degree, and then you're out in the world and you have to live till 125 years. So will that knowledge which you gained at the age of 25, will that knowledge suffice in a fast changing world for the next 100 years? No, right? That's the important question. Secondly, if I jokingly mentioned this, that if you get married at the age of 30 and if you have to live with the same partner until 120 for the next 90 years, will you be happy? So people around the next project after extending the lifespan is, how do you make people happy? And that happiness has been confused with pleasures. What we see today in the name of happiness is actually just pleasure which has been offered to you. And those pleasures are fleeting pleasures. It doesn't stay for long. They are not real content. And we will see that as we move on uh, during a session today. So, emotional intelligence, don't sit back and think it's a comfortable session and you just have to meditate and be mindful. It's all about getting uncomfortable. Like the German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche mentioned, be in love with your own fate, whatever happens to you. Emotional intelligence is accepting whatever happens to you and being in love with it. Uh, Having those immersive experiences rather than just having those comfortable experiences, because that's where the learning is, that's where you grow. Uh, a short exercise. This session is not going to be all dialogue or all monologue from my side. I would also make you do some tasks and activities. The first task that I want to get into is a very basic task of breathing, and you would say, that is something which I do, and that's why I'm alive. Why do I need to learn breathing? But this is a task which I would request all of you to look into and follow, as I say. And I would want to get your feedback as well. So I will ask you questions about this. All right. So just be relaxed. What I want you to do over here, just follow my cue, just follow what I say and try to focus over here. All right. Uh, I know we are all surrounded by smartphones, by a lot of notifications, by distractions. I just want you guys to shut it all off. Just keep your phone aside for a while. Just try to be away from noise. I know we are working from home or operating from home in an online environment. Just try your best to be away from noise as much as possible. Yeah. Uh, Place yourself in a comfortable position. Just be relaxed. Okay. Just drop your shoulders. Just smile. Bring a smile on your face. I think that helps a lot. It's an automatic remote control that controls your emotion. And be straight with your back upright. All right. Now, I just want you to close your eyes. Just forget about everything. Forget about me. Forget about the seminar. Just close your eyes and just be attentive to the instruction which I give you. While closing your eyes, I want you to focus on your breathing. And when I say that, I just want you to repeat in your mind about inhaling and exhaling. As you take your breath in and say inhale, hold it for some time, and just exhale out. All right? Simple. That's all that you have to do. Just close your eyes, be relaxed, drop your shoulders, close your eyes, and focus on a breath. Just focus on your nostrils where you breathe in. Focus on your nostrils. Just breathe in. And slowly breathe out. It's simple. I would want you to do this. I would leave you for a minute or maybe 90 seconds. And I just want you to practice this. Breathe in and breathe out. Breathe in. Breathe out. Continue this on your own for a minute. All right, let's come back. Well, now I would like someone to unmute the lines and from the participants, and I would like to get some feedback, or if someone would like to share their experience of this 1 minute. Sohail or Professor Sandeep, if you can just unmute the line for
Yeah.
participants.
Yes, sir, I will do that. Yes, Dr. Dipali.
Yeah, anyone would like to share how what did they feel in this 1 minute?
Hello.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm Dr. Dipali. It's very relaxing experience actually.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Dipali. Anyone else from students?
Shubhangi Patil.
Anyone would like to share the experience? I hope
Yes, sir.
you will practice it. Yes. Who's this?
Pramodini Bhosle. Good morning, sir.
Hi, Pramodini. Good morning. So, how was your experience? What did you feel in this 1 minute? Be absolutely frank.
It's really cool, calm, and relaxed.
Okay, great. So, Pramodini, do you practice meditation or is this the first time you're doing something like this?
Yes, sir.
The first time?
I intermittently practice about meditation because I
Okay.
am the member of Om Shanti, and when I was pregnant, that time also I have done a lot of times meditation.
Wow, excellent. Anyone else would like to share? Okay.
It's lovely to see a few messages that are floating in the chat box. So Rupali has said that it's so relaxing and it's calm. It's very peaceful by Dr. Jyoti Merak. Sheetal said it's much peaceful indeed. We just away from possibly the digital noise that's around us most of the time. Vivek is saying that it is very relaxing and felt really very good.
Yes, I just tuned into the chat box as well. Excellent. The irony is actually in reality what happens is, unless, like Pramodini mentioned, she's a regular practitioner and she does this on a regular basis. If you're doing this for the first time, you would have no idea of what is going on. Typically you would be so distracted. Okay. You would be distracted with different thoughts. Firstly, you would see who is this Roshan who's coming and asking us to close our eyes and start breathing. Those are the thoughts. Or someone might just think what is cooked for lunch today, or someone might be checking their phones, or someone might be just saying, there's so many messages coming in. That is a typical reaction that actually comes out. The reason being, our thoughts are so wayward. It's shooting in different directions at astronomical speed. We don't even realize the speed at which our thoughts flow. So if I ask you to shut your eyes and just focus on your breath, it's really very difficult if you're doing it for the first time, because your thoughts would go into different direction. Your thoughts would probably go into your, to know what your children are doing at this point of time, or what your friends are doing at this point of time, in all different directions. It's very difficult. But the idea is, whenever you have those thoughts, to get back, to gather it back and get it on one focal point, which is your breathing, which is your nostrils. That's the reason I mentioned focus on your nostrils. Bring back all your focus into one single point. And that's the essence. That's okay. You would lose thought again. And the idea is to get that thought, to catch that thought again from wherever it is or wherever it's wavering, to bring it back again to that one focal point. When you start this process, uh, start it daily by just giving a minute. Just try to do it for 1 minute and try to see if you're able to focus your attention even for a minute. I'll tell you, it's very difficult, but just try to do it for 30 seconds and increase it daily. Today, I'm able to do it for 30 minutes. It's a practice of 3 years, uh, which has helped me to reach there, you know. But what happens when you do this and when you get into this practice is that you are able to observe your thought that keeps wavering and bring control on your thought. Uh, the very famous cycle or very important cycle is of a stimuli and response. Something happens to you in the external world, and so you immediately respond to it, maybe in a happy way, in an angry way, in a sad way, in a depressed manner. But the moment you're able to take that pause when something happens to you and decide for yourself by controlling your thought, observing your thought on how you want to respond to that particular stimulus, that is the time when you get control over a lot of things in your life. Trust me, that is where you would find some of the great leaders, some of the great achievers, some of the great performers, practicing this. It might be unknowingly or it might be unknowingly as well, but that is where the secret lies, when you're able to focus on your thought and practice it. I would have loved to do the cycle again, but because of paucity of time, we'll just move forward. I think Shubhangi has raised her hand. Shubhangi, you would like to come in? Shubhangi, do you want to say something? I see your hand raised, or we will just move forward.
Right, Shubhangi, you can unmute yourself now.
No worries. I think she might be out. We can move forward. Yeah. So what I would like I said, as a takeaway, I would like you to go back to this exercise and try again. Because let's say you have to go to a gym and you say, I want to develop my physical appearance, I want to develop my physique. And you pick up the dumbbells for the first time and you see people next to you pumping iron, lifting weights, and doing 30, 40 reps. And you'll pick up the dumbbell and you just are able to do 1 or 2 reps. Do you keep the dumbbell down and do you run back home? No. What you do is you do 2 reps, you keep back the dumbbells and you try again. The idea is to come back again and repeat. The same thing goes with mindfulness. When you're practicing breath control, when you're trying to focus, you will lose attention. That is absolutely okay. It's like a muscle. You are improving your mental muscle. You're making it stronger by doing multiple reps and coming back. That's the essence. Uh, an important point in emotional intelligence, is we try to ask people, how are you? Are you okay? Is your mindset right? Are you thinking right? And so on and so on. And a very common question, right? Whenever you meet someone, you, out of courtesy, as a social norm, as a social acceptance, you say, how are you? But I look at how are you in a different way, and I will tell you why. And I call this as the goodness scale of life, right? Typically, when you ask people, how are you? It lies on two broad spectrums of being very positive and very negative, right? And what do those people who are absolutely positive have in their head is saying that I am perfect, right? I'm great in life. I am perfect. I know everything. I am Mr. Know How, and so on and so forth. invariably what they're telling to themselves, to themselves in their mind is, I cannot improve. At the same time, on the other end of the spectrum, you would find individuals who always play the victim card, who always feel entitled, who always feel everything bad that happens in this world happens to me. You know, they are always at the tipping point. They're always on the edge. If something goes wrong, they're like, oh, I told you, everything goes wrong with me. It always happens to me. They always crib. They're always the cribbers, right? And what they feel, their mindset is that, nothing good can ever happen. But with such mindsets, I have altered, or I have changed that goodness scale of life to this. Whatever existing belief that you have, if you're good or bad, balance it on the midpoint of that scale. All right. Even if you're good, say to yourself, yes, you might be good, you have done something well, but you need to improve on each day. Every day is a new learning. There is something out in the world which I don't know. And as it is, we know very little of this universe. I would say we don't even know 1% of what happens in this universe. So there is so much to know, there's so much to learn. Always be open to that. And that's how you improve. At the same time, if something bad happens to you, let's say today you lose your mobile, or something which you own breaks out, all right, or you are driving somewhere and your car gives up. Don't say that the worst always happens to you. Say it in your mind, okay, fine, agree, accept that something bad has happened, but say to yourself immediately that it could have been worse. All right, I'm glad that I'm not part of that worse, right? And we see so many accidents, we see so many mishaps on a daily basis in our lives. Be glad that you are not there, but you're just here. And as you look towards improvement, moving towards the good, you position yourself to pursuit of perfection, right? When you say to yourself, I'm curious to know more, uh, how do we do this? Okay, this is my area. I love working on projects. How can I make a project better? I learn that skill. When I've learned that, that's not the end point. How can I go even further? It is said to gain expertise on any task, you need 10,000 hours of hardcore experience on that task. Only then you are called an expert. So when you call yourself an expert, ask yourself, have you devoted 10,000 hours on that activity, real time practice into that activity? And at the same time, when you are subjected to something bad, always know there is someone somewhere out in the world who is subjected to even more grief, and there's even more bad stuff which happens out there. And be thankful, be grateful that you're not part of that. So one talks about constantly seeking improvement, which should be your mindset, and you should always move towards that in that direction. And from whatever bad has happened, always try to improve from those mistakes. uh, I don't say failures as the word failure. I say that's a learning curve which I can have successes and I would have learnings. Okay, these are the only two things which I know. uh, and to have a knack of this, to understand this, it's not easy. Let me tell you, I would agree, it's not easy to overnight change that mindset. All right. And as an important function, it's very important to know the brain composition and how our brain operates, because the brain operates in a very reflexive way, right? Something happens and you immediately snap up, right? What I'm saying is, when something happens, be patient, hold on, take a pause for a second, and decide how you want to react. Now, when we speak about this practice, we need to understand how the brain operates. And uh, let me tell you, there are two sides of the brain, and this is from psychologists, scientists, experts all over the world, where they say we have two brains. Every human, uh, I hope we all are humans over here. Every human has two brains, and the function of each set is very different from each other. And those two brains, this is the crux of the entire emotional intelligence topic, understanding the two brains and how they operate. All right. Uh, they are named differently. People call them system 1 or system 2. We call it type 1 or type 2. More famously or more commonly, it's known as the feeling brain and the thinking brain, right? Or you might also you might make made statements to people that, don't think from your gut, think from your mind, or think from your brain. Or people say, what does your gut tell you? What does your heart tell you? In reality, in actuality, these are the two forms of brain. Now, you don't have two brains. Don't make a mistake. You just have one single brain. Don't try to check where's the second brain. Okay, it's these are the two functionalities within a single brain which I'm talking about. All right. Now, the feeling brain, by the name itself, what do you think the feeling brain does? Right. The feeling brain always goes by its own gut feeling. It doesn't like to think. Uh, there are some things which you do based on your composition, your DNA. Like I mentioned earlier, our ancestors, how they used to grab food and how the craving for food generated, right? The way you look at people, automatically when you have food in your mouth, you start chewing. These are very automatic, reflexive things which your feeling brain does. You don't even have to think about it. Even with certain cognition things which you learn as a childhood, when you grow up in a certain family with people around you, you learn and you pick up things. You pick up language skills. You pick up different behavioral skills with the family and the ecosystem which you grew in your schools, in your colleges. That becomes part of your feeling brain again, because that over time, as you learn, becomes reflexive, becomes quick. You are very fast one. And then there are skills which you, as you grow in life, maybe you grow on to become a sports person, you go on to become a cricketer or a football player. You learn certain skills of how to play that sport. Over a period of time, as you practice that again becomes reflexive. So you don't have to think into these aspects. So for example, if I make statements, bread and dash, automatically you say bread and butter. If I say spoons and dash, you say spoons and forks, automatically that thing comes to mind. If I say 2 plus 2, you automatically say 4. So to complete these sentences, you do not have to think, okay? It's effortless. But at the same time, let's come back to the thinking. What does a thinking brain do? The thinking brain takes a pause, okay? In times where you have to think, where you apply logic, if I tell you 247 into 12, you would take some time. Your eyes will contract. Your eyebrows will get raised up. There's a certain stress that is created in your mind. You start thinking, you start calculating. You use the various calculation then formulas or methods which have been thought to calculate a certain number, right? It's not reflexive. If I ask you, how do you navigate from point A to point B of an unknown area? Again, you would take time to think on how you have to reach that particular point, right? You would think, I have to get down, I have to get into the car, I need to tell the driver about this location, and so on and so forth. This is non-reflexive. When you get into the thinking mode, your brain, takes out some energy, all right? Think of the brain as a computer system, and every computer system has a RAM, which is a limited space, right? You would have 8 GB, 12 GB, 16 GB RAMs. Now, if you load too many programs onto it, the processing capability, the speed of the RAM of your system will go down. The same thing happens with our brains as well. The feeling brain does not take any space. It operates automatically. It does not take any memory. It does not take any load. The thinking brain takes load. Now consider this as a bank account, right? Your brain is a bank account, okay? And you have a limited amount of money over there. We would like to have unlimited supply of money all the time, but reality is we have a limited supply of money. We would have a limited balance over there, whatever it might be. Now, when you want to use that balance, you will be very careful in using the money at the right place, because it's a limited resource, it's a limited supply. The same thing happens with the brain. The brain is a bank, all right? Things which require reflex action, it does not take any money. But the moment you start using your thinking brain, you are reducing the capacity or the potential of the brain. And that's the reason whenever you are prolonged or when you are stretched into thinking for too long, invariably you start, losing focus, you start losing attention, your performance drops, and all those things happen. The best thing that you need to do is over here is take a break, relax, go back. And that's the reason you find people saying, take a break. Breaks are important. You need to refresh, you need to relax, you need the memory that you have gained from the thinking brain goes into your prefrontal cortex. That information has to go back into your server and get stored over there. And that's your conscious and unconscious minds, right? So these are the two natures of the brain. What happens is when we don't apply, there are moments where you need to apply your feeling brain, the reflex section. There are moments where you need to apply from the thinking brain. You can assume, let's say, what happens if you have to plan out a certain event and you don't use your thinking brain, right? You just give instructions, okay, fine, based on your intuition, based on your past experience, without knowing what the event is all about. That event will definitely be a disaster, correct? Uh, if you do not know to cook, if you step into the kitchen and you just say, okay, fine, I think this has to be prepared in this fashion. And if you cook that food, will you eat it yourselves? No, you won't. So, these are the functionality. At the same time, if you put too much exertion, if you stretch your thinking brain too much, what happens is you lose out. You lose out and you drop performance and everything goes for a toss. Now, the other thing is when your thinking brain is in play, the feeling brain automatically shuts down. Okay. And let me give you an example of this. When I go for a run, all right, and my run comprises of walking and going for a jog simultaneously. When I have to listen, so I typically listen to audiobooks when I'm going out for my run and walk. I use my time that way. When I want to focus on what is happening over there, I do that when I'm walking because walking comes naturally to us. It's a reflex action. I don't need to think how to walk. But the moment I start running, I stop my audiobook and I focus on my running because automatically, because anytime in the past, if I have tried to run and listen to the audiobook at the same time, I'm not able to focus on the book that I'm listening to. I'm not able to catch the words because my focus, my thinking brain is in play and it's not allowing me to have any other task done at the same time. So when the thinking brain is in play, the feeling brain automatically shuts down. And look at the beauty of our society, the social acceptance. Typically, when you see a driver driving and he has to take a sharp cut, and if you have two people sitting behind the driver who are constantly talking, right? And the driver is driving on a road and suddenly he has to take a sharp turn. Normally, you would see those two people getting quiet. They know that they should not disturb. It's a sharp turn that they have to take at this point of time. That's how even our social behaviors and our social norms have been shaped based on these thinking brain and feeling brain. So looking at what I said is the feeling brain creates a bias. You go by bias. You don't want to think about it. You are familiar with it. Okay, you accept and say, okay, fine. This happens on a daily basis. So you don't have to think over it. It just goes with the flow. So there's a bias. When you have to select two people, let's say there are two people in front of you and you have to select a leader. One person is known to you, the other is unknown. Automatically, you would select the person who is known to you because the mind does not like unknown. By design, we want to avoid effort. We don't want to think. Our minds are lazy. So we have this bias created, which is a default mode. It helps quick thinking, like I just mentioned. It's automatic. You don't have to really rack your brain to think, the activities that you do on a daily basis. It is associative, right? Associative in the sense, uh, like I mentioned, when you mention bread, you will think of food, you will think of butter, you will think of knife. These are the associative elements. If I tell you water, you would think of thirst, you would think of a glass, you would think of cold, hot, and so on. These are the words which get associated, and this happens automatically. Like I mentioned, it does not require a working memory. Now, how do these associative items, when you associate things automatically, how does it happen? Like I mentioned, it happens on pre-existing beliefs and your prior decision making. Something that you have done in the past gave you certain result. So if that result was rewarding, you would keep that in your mind and remember that for the next time as well. So it becomes faster. And it has high capacity. Any computer system which does not occupy space on the RAM will operate very quickly if it's on the same server, right? Because it does not go and tap into other area to retrieve memory. The memory is right there in front of you. At the same time, the thinking brain, going back to the same example of having two people in front of you, and if you have to select a person for a very critical task, let's say you have to select a person to lead the country, or let's say to select a person who has to operate on you, you have got into a hospital. Would you go to a person whom you know, or would you go to a person whom you don't know but might have better skills, who is better experience? At that time, you would actually sit down to evaluate, and that's where your thinking brain is at play. Uh, of course, because you have to think, you have to process information. The design is that your brain starts thinking slowly. It's controlled, it's not automatic. You decide, you automatically, there's an algorithm which is created in your mind. There's a flow chart. If you want to go to A to B, I go to this place, that place, this place, this place, so on and so forth. So you control the flow of thought. All right. It's rule based. You apply different rules. Going back to the example of cooking, when you step into the kitchen, you would ensure that you have all the safety measures. You ensure that you have enough ingredients to cook the food that you want to. You will ensure the temperature is right. So you apply different rules, right? And that's what's happened in when you're thinking, when you're using system 2. Uh, it requires working memory. Like I said, it will keep putting stress on your brain. It's consequential and decision making. Whenever you need to take hard decisions, the thinking brain is at play. And it has limited capacity. You cannot go on with it forever and ever and ever, because that what eventually creates a lot of stress. Now, the most important part is every individual would look at this. Many of us would look at this and say, you know what, I always make informed decisions. And we have such people, right? I don't go with my gut feeling. I always know what I want to do, and I always take the proper decision. I always calculate the risk. However, every individual for themselves, they think that they always think from their thinking brain, but we are always wrong. Experiments in the past, I will not dwell into it because of time, have always proven that these things always come out from the feeling brain. We always assume that you think and decide to the thinking brain, but it's always the feeling brain that is in control. It's only when you need a thinking brain to come into play that questions your bias, that questions, your thinking capacity, or requires you to think louder, is when your thinking brain comes into play. Otherwise, by default, it's your feeling brain. All right. And that's really what creates ease and stress. So when you're using your feeling brain from system 1, there's absolute ease. There's no stress on your mind. You're acting from the feeling brain. At the same time, there is stress which is created when you when you use your thinking brain to play. Like I mentioned, it's intuitive because it's based on past experiences, while at the same time, the thinking brain creates stress because it's based on facts. And typically, as humans, we don't like to, you don't like to dig into data. We don't want to see the reality. We like to go what is the common belief around us. We are familiar and friendly when we are at ease. At the same time, when there is certain stress, we get vigilant and we are suspicious about things around us. And you are at your creative best when you are using system 1 or the feeling brain. You suppress your creativity, because you're following logic when you're following system 2. Now, where do you use this? Typically, when you're trying to establish trust. So if I have to define two people, person A and person B, right? I would define 5 characteristics for each of the two people. I would say the first person is honest, hardworking, truth, lazy, uninterested. Honest, hardworking, truthful, lazy, uninterested. That's person one. Person two is lazy, uninterested, hardworking, honest, and truthful. Now, when I define these two characteristics, you would often go with person A and not person B. And the reason for that is the first impression, the order of the characteristics which I mentioned. I mentioned honest, truthful, and hardworking first for person A. And that is where your impression was captured. Even though the characteristics are same for person A and person B, the first impressions matter. And that is coming out from your system one, from your type one thinking, from your reflexive brain thinking. Although parameters remain the same, we go with first impressions, right? And that's the reason to say when you go for an interview or when you're in front of a boss, the first day at your work, the first day on your date, right, with a partner, is very important because the first impression always matters. Uh, Typically, we try to avoid risk. It is said that a human will try to save 50 rupees even if they know they will get a profit of 100 rupees by doing something else. So we are more risk averse, right? We like to avoid risk rather than gain profits. And that again comes from our system one thinking, which we need to deploy our system two into. Familiarity can be brought about with the font, with the kind of color. That also creates familiarity. When I show you a certain brand, when I say Coke or when I say Pepsi, automatically the colors red and blue flash into your face. That is how your system one thinks. By repeating or by, like I mentioned, if you put too much stress on yourself with system two, what happens is your ego gets depleted. You are generally after some time not focused and you tend to avoid things, or you want to finish off things in a haphazard manner. You need to take enough breaks and you need to move on it to have a better performance. I would like to quote a very famous example or an experiment. I'm not sure if any of you have read this book. It's called The Invisible Gorilla, and it was a very famous experiment as well, which brought the system one and system two, the feeling brain, thinking brain, from a right into forefront. And I'll tell you what happened with this. There were two sets of players, all right, team one and team two. Team one was asked to be dressed in black completely, and team two was asked to dress in white, all right, and they were asked to play basketball. Okay, and these two teams were watched by an audience, two groups of audiences. Now again, the audience were divided into two groups. One group was asked specifically to observe the team which were dressed in white, and they were asked to count the number of passes that were made by team one, by the team who were dressed in white. And the other group was just asked to go and watch the game and enjoy. All right. Now, the team who was just watching the game and enjoying, they were using system one. They were relaxed, they're watching the game, nothing to think about, nothing to worry about. At the same time, the other group who were asked to count the number of passes done by the white team, players in white, had to actually really focus very hard and get into counting. They had the entire attention on the game, on the white player specifically, and nothing else. Now, what happened is a very funny incident happened. A guy dressed in a gorilla suit just came in the game, and he was there in the game for about 9 seconds, thumping his chest for 9 seconds, and he just went off. Later on, the two groups were asked, what did you see? Surprisingly and shockingly, the group who were counting the number of passes done by the players dressed in white did not observe the gorilla at all. Right? While the other group saw the gorilla and explained exactly what that person dressed in gorilla did. Now, this brings the point which I mentioned, that when your system 2 is in play, your system 1 shuts off. It's not able to think. And that's the reason you look at workplaces when leaders are busy into working on some important projects, or in environments where the professors are busy explaining into anything else, we typically shut down our emotional intelligence. We do not even listen to the other person's plea or the problems that the other person faces. More so in the corporate world. Typically, you will see a lot of leaders, a lot of managers who just don't want to listen because some task or some project has to be completed on some time. And that's where emotional intelligence has to come into play. You need to understand, you need to know when you deploy your thinking prowess. At the same time, you need to know when to deploy the relaxing environment for your team so that you are open to them, you're listening to them. And that's why we say, with this experiment was proved that we are blind to the obvious, and many leaders will never acknowledge this. They will say, oh, I have done everything that I had to do. I was listening to them. They will never agree that they were not sympathetic or empathetic to the people. So they say that we are blind to the obvious, and we are also blind to a blindness where we never agree to the pain of others. you know it's a very important. So I dwelled on this topic because this is the crux of emotional intelligence. Now, how does, we spoke about two things very, very deeply in this section. We spoke about knowledge, our beliefs, our information, how we gather knowledge, and how our beliefs are converted. And more or less, we don't go by real facts. We don't go by data. We go by what our beliefs are, right? I have sessions and I have discussions which talk deeply into that. But for now, let's work out. And this was a very famous quote by Immanuel Kant, who said that to make room for belief, I had to remove knowledge. And that's what many of us do in our daily lives. All right. How is this knowledge, how is this belief altered and created and formed on a daily basis? You know, like I mentioned at the start, we are amongst an information overload. There is so much of information that goes around that it becomes very difficult for us to actually pick up and say, yes, this is true information. I'm sure as students, you would have heard of technologies like deep fake, where you can create videos, someone else's video, and you can add some audio where that guy is saying something else. A very famous video of deep fake was President Obama's video, where he just spoke about sending the nuclear bomb. Now imagine how dangerous that is, right? So getting the right information is very cumbersome. We are living in an attention economy. There are corporates, there are brands all across the world who offer us free products, and I'll play the next video to explain that to you all, who offer us everything in the name of free just to gather our attention. And that attention actually gets, mingled with the brand strategy and what someone wants to sell us, to think that is the truth. And then that truth becomes a belief. All right. And then you have growth hackers. I see so many people with fancy designations on LinkedIn saying that I'm a growth hacker. Typically, what they do is, there's a terminology which is called as priming. I will not dwell into that right now because of time. But what I would do is, I would request people to read this article on priming, which will help you understand this entire topic. Priming essentially means, getting into the mindset of a person and, uh, making him to think the way you want. I have just put on this link on the group, and people can read this in their own free time whenever you want to. Uh, so that's what priming is. It helps. When, let's say, a brand wants to sell a product to someone, right? What to do is they will prime you into thinking that that product is the right fit for you, even though without thinking it's not. All right. So you have to be careful about that. I'm back to my screen. I hope the screen is visible. So I have a short video which actually talks about how this works. Just hold on. Yeah, I'll just play this video. Just hold on for a second. Just look at this video. It's from my own channel. It's created by myself. I keep posting a lot of videos which help. Sohail, just tell me if the video is completely audible and visible to all.
Yes, sure, I will do that. No, the video is not available. You have to reshare the screen.
Oh, okay, sure. One second. Is it visible now?
Yes.
So yeah, that was a quick video on how technology is trying to, interfere our lives and create some deeper issues actually, which can be problematic in the long run. You know, I'll just get back. Yeah. So, this is what actually divides the attention. If we want to focus on something, how brands and how companies today uh, are getting, or rather hacking into a brain to think. And the famous example uh, in front of us that has happened was Cambridge Analytica. And I'm sure every one of you might have gone through that use case into how a certain organization, manipulated a large platform to maneuver the thoughts and the emotions of a voting population to vote in favor of some leader, right? Because engineers on Facebook, they were just engineers, right? They knew, they did what best they can. They gave the best systems, they had the best analytics, but they were not social engineers. Probably they didn't think from the thinking brain on what could be the repercussions of this data getting leaked out into the wrong hands. And that's what exactly happened. All right. Uh, so when we speak about, the two brains, and, I mentioned about happiness, uh, there's another famous experiment that was conducted uh, to explain people how happiness works, or to study how happiness is being perceived by us humans. And this was a famous experiment called the blue dot experiment. All right. Uh, it's also in scientific terms, it's also called the prevalence induced concept change. What happened here was there were 1,000 people. There were 1,000 people who were made to sit in front of a computer screen. All right. And then they were told, in fact, they were also told that if you report this correctly, you will be paid by us. Now, what happened on the computer screen was they said you will see dots of blue color and purple color, right? There will be dots of blue color and purple color coming onto your screen. Whenever you see a blue dot, you have to select blue, or you have to tick blue. Whenever you see a purple dot, you have to select on purple. And 1,000 dots were sent to the viewers, to the audience who were part of this experiment. The first 200 dots were blue and people reported them correctly. But eventually the purple started coming in. And when the purple started coming in, people started reporting it correctly. But slowly, there were people who even reported the purple dots as blue. All right. Even though they were told about this earlier, even they were informed that they would be paid for correct reporting, this was happening. Now, you would say, what's the relevance of this experiment with our own happiness? Okay. After this experiment, after the dots, the researchers, they replaced the two dots, the blue and the purple dots, with faces of people. There were two faces. One was a happy face and one was a sad face. And they were shown the sad faces first on their screen. So people correctly selected that this is a sad face, this is a sad face. After maybe 200 sad faces, they started showing in the happy faces. All right. And there were people who, again, instead of reporting happy faces, they reported sad faces incorrectly. Okay. What was happening is, as the people were subjected to one form of a face or a color, they got used to that color, and suddenly they expanded that definition of the color or the face into another face, into the happy face, or into the purple color as well. All right. Invariably, what this means is, however happy, constantly when we are surrounded by negative news. We are surrounded by negative vibes. We are surrounded by the bad things, and especially uh, with the news channels, with media houses who keep reporting this kind of information. Because, like I mentioned, going back to our original emotions of our ancestors, we tend to listen to negative news very faster because that creates fear, and we are more attracted towards fear. And I will talk about that when we come to fear, that we are more attracted to that kind of emotion. The news agencies, the media houses dwell on this, okay, for their own TRPs. They keep pumping in the bad news. Eventually, what happens to us as individuals, to us as customers, to us as the audience, is that we think everything around us is just bad. Even when there are doses of happy news that happen, when there's happiness that happens around us, we assume that there's some mischief behind it and something bad will happen. And that's the reason many of you would have this feeling that, something when something good happens, you get this sensation that, I hope this remains. I hope something bad doesn't happen. Invariably, that's a reflex action again, which gets plugged into a system one. And whenever good happens, we don't stick with it. We think that something bad might be happening very soon, right? And that is what the blue dot experiment talks about. So it says that eventually, that can humans ever be happy? There's a saying uh, that if I start showing a person with a gun, okay, and eventually that gun gets replaced by a rose, will humans start thinking and start looking at the rose as a gun in future? You never know. All right. And even though our situation improves, consider ourselves, look at humans 100, 200 years ago, the resources that were available back then and the resources that are available today. There were no means of communication, I think 100 years ago, if I'm right. But today, at that point of time, people would be happy if they could communicate with one another in a faster way. But today, if we don't find our mobile charger for 5 minutes, we just lose our temper completely, right? And that's what we define. The more our situation improves, we get into smaller issues. We invent issues to get angry on a good. If we get a good salary, if we are paid well, we buy a new car, we start worrying about the maintenance of the car. If we move into a nice big house, we start worrying about the upkeep of the house. We invent problems, and that's again something which comes as a reflex method. It's built into a system one, and that's where we need to get emotionally intelligent about this. That this is only a thinking; it's not the reality. And like I mentioned, we just get into the habit of expanding the definition of our problem. All right. And where all this comes from, it's fear. Now, fear, a very, very innate emotion, a very important emotion to understand. I wish I could speak on this much more, but I think I'm short on time. Uh, we need to understand the two natures of fear. One is, there is fear that which constructs us, there's fear which destroys us. If we don't have fear of crossing the road, we will be run by a truck or a car immediately. But if we keep harboring fear of something which does not exist in reality, which might just happen, it only destroys us by creating anxiety and by creating, sadness and frustration. I'm sure many of you might have seen the movie Rocky, and I think it's Rocky 4 or Rocky 5, where Sylvester Stallone tells to his son, Frankie Fear is my best friend, because when I get into the boxing ring, I have this fear of that my opponent will be better than me. And that fear helps me to prepare well. That fear, guides me, it protects me. And that fear is good. That is a constructing fear which I'm talking about. Now, there's a very important term called as the amygdala hijack. I will not like to dwell much on it, but there are moments, let's say you had a bad experience. Let's say you were walking down the street, a regular street under your house, below your house. You're walking and there's a hole over there and you tripped and you fell down and unfortunately you fractured your hand. Now, this entire incident is recorded in your memory as fear. What happens is the next time when you walk on the same street, invariably you would have the same memory gets recalled. Okay, and you start thinking about the same pain which you had by fracturing your hand. That process is the amygdala is somewhere which sits in your brain. uh, it gets too technical when I explain. It sits in your limbic system of the brain, which incites emotion. All your emotions are incited into your amygdala. And whenever you encounter a previous incident, especially which has caused you pain and grief because of the sound, so you would know of the emotion that when you hear a certain song, it takes you to a different zone. Maybe it reminds you of something. When you wear a shirt or some outfit, it reminds you the first time you wore, right? So that's when your amygdala is hijacked. It's hijacked by the previous incidents. And when it's a negative one, it brings back the fear, and that stops you from doing what you could do or you want to. All right. And I have mentioned in the past, the growth of Homo sapiens has always been under fear. That is a constructive fear. We have always grown as individuals because we were afraid. We want to know more. We want to get information. We want to be assured. We want to deploy our thinking brain into play and know that we have the right information so that we proceed further. And over the years, Homo sapiens have grown under constructive fear, but we need to ensure and list out what are the destructive fears that might pull us down. Typically, there are 7 types of fear. There is fear of poverty. There are people who says, I don't want to get rich because if I get rich, uh, it could be corrupt money. I don't know how to manage money. I don't want to enjoy success. I don't want to climb up the corporate ladder because I don't know how to do this. I am okay in my current situation. So people have this fear and they like to live in that. And that's a growth mindset which people don't get in, right? There is fear of criticism. I will not do something because I'm afraid of getting criticism from someone. Something which which I can learn, I can do it well, I still don't do it because of criticism. Fear of ill health. There's a condition known as hypochondria, which I constantly am thinking that something is not right within me. I'm not keeping well. I always feel sick. Even if I'm all right, medically, there's nothing wrong with me. But there's this condition that I think that, always there's something wrong. There's something, I'm unwell. There's something not right. That's another fear. Fear of loss of love. People don't get into relationship thinking that what if I lose someone? They don't get into healthy arguments with people thinking that what if uh, I lose that friendship with that person, or what if I fail, what if I'm wrong? There is fear of loss of liberty. I don't want to take up a senior position in an organization because I will lose my freedom. I don't want to go and travel, go and stay with my parents because I cannot do what I want. People have these fears. Fear of old age, very common. What will happen when I grow old? Who will take care of me? How will I take care of myself? So on and so forth. And eventually fear of death, because death is unknown. No one knows uh, what lies behind. And there's a very good famous book to understand this, which is written by Dalai Lama himself, which is known called The Art of Dying. Beautifully explained how you can embrace that unknown moment when it comes to you and for your family. So these are 7 fears that typically people have, and we must at all times be aware of this, be intelligent about it, and then move on in life. All right. Like I mentioned, technology today is promising a lot of things to us, right? And we are clinging on to the best technology that comes in the hope that our lives will get improved. We will have convenience. But imagine, is that life really getting better, or is it really getting worse? Are we disconnected, or are we getting disconnected from individuals? That is utopia and dystopia. Earlier, it took, I believe, 20 years or 25 or 30 years for a television set to reach 100 million homes. Facebook reached billions of users within no time, within, I believe, within 5 to 10 years. Today, every technology, we are just consuming technology because it's out there without understanding what are the repercussions. I've already played that in my video, right? And technology will be created at that pace. We will lose our track on which technology is good for us. And that's the reason we should be very careful of how it works, how it operates, and importantly, what value would it bring into us. Singularity is a term, is a time when, as we move into the robotic age, there will be a time when machines will start coding on their own. What will happen to humans? And all of that is created by humans itself. So we all know that humans are created from apes. We were apes earlier, and then we became humans. But no one knows from humans what is the next that we are getting into. And that is a phase of singularity. It's a huge topic. I don't want to dwell into it right now. But as of now, I would just say it's a time when machines would crack into their own source code and will not require humans to even create codes or create automation that we are creating today. So we come to the final frontier of intelligence, right? Why emotional intelligence is so important. Right at the bottom of the pyramid, we have human intelligence, which is created through various cognitions, our beliefs, our ecosystem. And today, artificial intelligence covers it. It's over that. It is learning human language. It is learning all the tasks that we do, right? And in a way, it is controlling in a very profound way everything that we do. It's displacing humans. It is presenting choices. It's presenting ease. It's giving us convenience. But will it completely destroy humans? Is the question. To counter that, I look at emotional intelligence as the final answer. That when you are emotional intelligence, not just normal intelligence. Normal intelligence can be gained by getting degrees, by talking to people. But emotional intelligence, going back to the first slide, is when you are self-aware of the choices which are presented to you and how do you use those choices. And in the end, with those choices, what is the right decision that you make is something which emotional intelligence will offer you. And that is what I look at it as the final frontier of intelligence for humans. Uh, there's this final video. I'm not sure, it will take 5 to 6 minutes. So, Hale, do I have time, or maybe I can share the link with the audience?
I believe we can. You can share the link with the audience so that they can have a look at it. Because then that would eat up into the time where I see that certain learners have some questions for you.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So I'll share this link, and I think this is someone. This is an Indian sage. We spoke about a lot of international authors, but Indian sage who had this self-inquiry at the age of 14, 1-4, and he came up with this concept of this self-inquiry, and he said, "No, Nanya, who am I?" It's a beautiful video. I follow this sage. He's no more. He's an Indian sage. He was in Madurai. I will share this video. Please go through it, and it'll give you a perspective of who we actually are and how these thoughts, revolve around us. What happens is when we are angry or we are agitated by something, we invariably think that I'm an angry person. In fact, that's just a thought. It's just a fleeting thought that goes around. When I'm upset, when I'm depressed with something that has happened, we forget that it's only a momentary thing, and we attribute that depression to our entire personality, which is wrong. At the same time, happiness can be momentary with something, and we attribute happiness to pleasure, saying that my next happiness will come in the next promotion, the next house I buy, the next car I buy, and so on and so forth. So I think watch this video. It's a beautiful one. Gives a lot of insights on emotional intelligence, and I would say it's a guide. It's a guiding light to understand this topic better. That's my time. Thank you so much, and I'm open for questions now.
Roshan, I have a request from a few learners. A couple of them just put it on the chat. They would like to see the video actually.
Oh, sure, no problem. I'm always open to say that. I just was wary about the time. Just hang on. Okay, let me just fetch that video on YouTube. Hang on. Just allow me a minute, Sohail.
Sure.
Okay.
Right. In the meantime, while you're fetching the video, Roshan, one of the learners actually is asking. You recently mentioned in the beginning of the session, you mentioned that you had an anxiety issue, and of course, you came out positively out of it. So the learner actually is asking, like, what do you do to start, to start off with, accepting it, and how do you get away from it without actually taking a pill?
Yeah, this started off in 2015. And like I mentioned, I did not have any past background or any past trauma. I wasn't going through any trauma or any pressure in my life as well. To say that that it was a relapse or something of that sort, because typically such kind of instances happen when maybe childhood you had an issue or something like that, but nothing happened. Personally, I was fine. Personal life, my professional life was fine. There were no issues with it at all, and that suddenly happened. I don't know for what reason. So the initial first 6 months, uh, people won't believe it that I just felt that every time I was getting a heart attack, and I will just collapse. And in that fear, uh, I did an ECG for 6 times in the first 6 months. I used to just run into hospitals and go and do. So I mentioned about hypochondria in the slide of fear. I had developed that condition of hypochondria. At all times, I used to feel that something is wrong with me, and I went on and I went ahead to do different kinds of medical tests. I don't know. I spent so much money on doing those medical tests and so on, and all those tests used to come normal. It was very weird. uh, and then there's a fear which came into me where I was very afraid to be alone anyway. I used to not drive alone. I used to not even walk alone, like simple things which are reflexive to us was impacted for me very badly. uh, you know and I there was a point in time where actually I used to go was very afraid to go to sleep as well, because I used to just wake up in the middle of the night and kind of get worried about what is happening. So because of that fear, I was actually afraid of going to sleep as well. So those are things. And then eventually what helped me is I accepted that condition, because many of the time we don't accept that something is wrong. I went out and sought professional counseling uh, from an expert, and I started talking and started discussing a lot of things, what was happening to me. uh, I used to bring it out. I underwent Reiki sessions as well, a lot of things. And then I started reading. In my life, I had never read a single book in my life. Let me tell you very frankly, forget writing a book was a distant dream altogether. I never read any book in my life. Let me be very frank. But to divert my attention, I needed something to divert my attention. So to divert my attention, I started reading books, reading into these topics. I started reading into this material on why these kind of things happen, and that is why I started learning this. And then slowly I started blogging and writing about it. People found it very relevant. They said this is very true. Then I started converting those blogs into, you know then I thought, why not collect these blogs and make it into a book? And that's how it happened, and the entire book came out. So the entire book writing exercise was actually my recovery treatment, so therapy, so to say. uh it's funny, but yeah, that's the truth.
Lovely, actually. It's nice to see you share your experiences here.
I've got any more questions? I can play the video or I can take questions.
No, we'll actually play the video and then I'll and then end the session then.
Sure. Okay, share sound. Don't need the sound actually, just text. I hope it's visible and audible.
Yes, it's visible and audible too.
Yeah, that was a bit meditative.
Well, yes, absolutely it was. And thanks for sharing your thoughts and the videos. They were quite insightful and lovely that we could hear you out.
I was just reading through the chat. I didn't, sorry, I didn't go through the chat because I normally keep the chat window off because it distracts. And I think some excellent comments. I'm glad that people are actually taking this positively and like it. I've just shared some of them, asked a link to the book. I've just shared the link as well. Uh, this is the book. I've kept a copy. This is what I wrote when I was going through my mental issues. It helped me as a guide itself in writing these things out. So it was great. The link is shared. Some people asked about the video which I shared. So you can just on YouTube, I have my channel, which is called Cult Curator. I'll put that link as well. And you can just go to roshanshetty.com. On my site, everything is available. My YouTube link, my Spotify, I do podcast link as well. My blog, everything is out there. Just go to roshanshetty.com. You can subscribe and get. Someone asked me the names of the books which I refer. I read a lot. I target at least 2 to 3 books in a month. So that's about 30 to 40 books, which I read in a year. I read while going to sleep. I read while going for a run. I read while working out. I read while driving, in all formats, in audiobooks, in physical books, and so on. So that's where all this information comes from. So yeah.
Yeah, lovely. I would have loved to take a few more, questions from learners. They definitely have questions for you, Roshan. Although, unfortunately, though we have a lack of time due to the other commitments, I would request the learners if they have any questions, they can always write to me, and I'll have Roshan answer them all for you.
Yeah, and individually they can always connect to me. I'm active on Instagram. My handle is Roshan_Shetty_author. You can just find me on Instagram and you can always connect, and I can answer whatever questions, or we can have interactions over there as well. So nothing to worry about.
That would be great. That will actually be great. So with this now, I'd like to call upon Dr. Yogesh Zazare to give us thank you note.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Sohail, for giving me this opportunity to present vote of thanks today. A very good afternoon to all. It gives me an immense pleasure today to deliver the vote of thanks on this today's occasion. I would like to thank our today's speaker, corporate trainer, and a mentor, Mr. Roshan Shetty, for delivering wonderful webinar on this emotional intelligence. And this webinar, sir, it was really an amazing for all of us, especially for our all young learners, to nurture soft skills to become successful in their career. And as well as it was really a great webinar which I had ever had in my life. And basically, it has made people to how to become more meaningful in their life. So this was really a great webinar. And I would likely to also thank Honorable Dr. Smita Jadhav, ma'am, Trustee and Executive Director, Dr. D.Y. Patel Vidyapith, Pune, for always being the source of motivation for all of us to arrange such a corporate webinar for all our learners' development. I must thank our beloved Director, Honorable Dr. Safia Faruqi, ma'am, for arranging such a thoughtful and informative webinar and leading our institute towards development. And also, I would likely to thank all our faculty members, staff members, and all learners for making this webinar more successful. With this thank you note, I declare here that this webinar has been successfully completed. So thank you all of you. Thank you, Roshan. Thank you, Sohail. Thank you all my friends.
Thank you so much for having me. I think it was a great experience to interact, and I see a lot of people stayed back. So thank you so much for your time. I really obliged.
Thank you so much, Roshan. And with this, now I declare the session as closed.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Roshan.